When winter shows its fiercest side, it doesn't just blanket the world in snow. It can turn deadly in seconds. Snowstorms, while mesmerizing with their icy beauty, have claimed lives in ways that are shocking, unexpected, and often captured on camera. From motorists trapped in blinding whiteouts to hikers lost in frozen landscapes, these brutal winter events reveal just how fragile life can be when nature unleashes its fury. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most brutal snowstorm tragedies caught on camera, moments that left survivors shaken and the world stunned. The storm didn't just arrive quietly over the mountains of Afghanistan in February 2010. It roared in with a violence that no one on the Salang Pass was truly prepared for. The Salang Pass, a narrow and treacherous lifeline cutting through the towering Hindu Kush mountains north of Kabul, had always been dangerous in winter. Locals knew that avalanches were common here. Nearly 250 avalanches strike this road every year, but this time felt different. The snowfall was heavier, the wind was sharper, and the sky carried a weight that felt ominous. Then the blizzard hit. Visibility vanished almost instantly. Snow whipped across the highway leading to the Salang Tunnel, one of Afghanistan's most critical routes connecting Kabul to the north. Drivers, families, traders, truckers were already inside the tunnel or inching along the steep mountain road when the mountain itself gave way. Without warning, massive walls of snow thundered down the slopes. One avalanche, then another, and another. By the time it was over, at least 36 avalanches had ripped through the southern approach to the tunnel, burying more than 3.5 kilometers of roadway. Vehicles were crushed, shoved off cliffs, or entombed beneath meters of snow. Inside the poorly ventilated tunnel, thousands were trapped in their cars as exhaust fumes thickened the air. The cold was brutal, the darkness suffocating. Imagine sitting in your vehicle, engine running for warmth, snow piling higher against your windows, the road ahead gone, and behind you, sealed shut by tons of ice and rock. No signal, no clear escape, just the sound of distant rumbling, and the terrifying possibility that another avalanche could hit at any second. Early reports feared dozens dead. That number would rise sharply. Afghanistan's interior minister at the time warned that as many as 2,500 people could be trapped. Survivors later described cars completely buried, passengers clawing at snow with bare hands, screaming for help that couldn't immediately reach them. Some vehicles were pushed down the mountainside entirely. Others were flattened under the sheer force of sliding snow. And while rescuers fought to reach them, another silent killer crept in: carbon monoxide. With traffic stalled for hours inside the tunnel, engines idled in desperation for heat. The air turned toxic. The rescue effort was chaotic and heroic all at once. More than 500 Afghan National Army troops rushed to the scene, joined by helicopters and bulldozers. NATO forces deployed Chinook helicopters to drop food and medical supplies to those stranded. The injured were airlifted to hospitals in Charikar and Bagram airfield, but clearing the snow was painfully slow. The storm hadn't truly ended. The mountains were still unstable. By February 10th, around 2,500 people had been rescued, but many never made it out. At least 175 lives were lost in the Salang avalanches, some crushed instantly, others suffocating beneath snow, and some succumbing to cold and toxic fumes while waiting for help that struggled to arrive in time. What makes this tragedy even more haunting is that warnings had existed. Heavy snowfall had been forecast. The structural defenses along the pass had already been weakened by previous avalanches, yet the road remained open. Critics later pointed to limited infrastructure, scarce resources, and a system unprepared for a disaster of this magnitude. In a country already strained by conflict and poverty, nature delivered a devastating blow. And the pain wasn't isolated to Salang. Across Afghanistan that winter, avalanches and flash floods killed dozens more. In provinces like Panjshir, entire homes were swallowed. Residents dug through snow with their bare hands, desperate to find relatives buried underneath. One man told reporters he had learned that 2 of his family members were dead, 8 more still trapped somewhere beneath the white silence. For many Afghans, the Salang Pass disaster became one of the deadliest avalanche events in the country's recent history. A chilling reminder that sometimes the most brutal force isn't war or politics, but nature itself. And if you watch the footage from that time, rescue crews scrambling across unstable slopes, cars barely visible under towering drifts, survivors wrapped in blankets with hollow, stunned expressions, you can feel it. The mountain didn't just collapse that day, it swallowed a highway, it trapped thousands, and it left behind a silence that still echoes through the Hindu Kush. On the night of January 7, 2022, Murree didn't look like a disaster zone. It looked like a postcard. Families from across Pakistan had driven for hours to see the snow fall over the pine-covered hills of the beloved hill station in Punjab. For many, it was a dream moment. Children pressing their faces to car windows, couples taking selfies as flakes drifted down, engines humming in long lines of traffic that seemed almost festive. But within hours, that dream turned into a frozen nightmare. The snowfall that began earlier in the week had already drawn massive crowds. Warnings had been issued about heavy snow between January 6 and 9. Advisories suggested checking weather and traffic updates before traveling. Still, the roads filled. More than 157,000 vehicles entered Murree as the blizzard intensified. Bumper-to-bumper traffic choked every main artery in and out of town. And then the storm escalated. 4 feet of snow fell. Temperatures plunged to -8 degrees Celsius. The same snow that had looked magical in Instagram stories began swallowing cars whole. Exhaust pipes disappeared under thick drifts. Windshield wipers froze mid-swipe. Engines idled for warmth as families realized they weren't moving anywhere. Some tourists tried to abandon their vehicles and walk to nearby hotels, but even that added to the chaos. Cars left at odd angles narrowed already congested roads. In some areas, more than 13,000 vehicles were crammed onto routes designed for only 4,000. Trees snapped under the weight of snow and crashed onto vehicles. Roads became impassable. Hotels, overwhelmed and in some cases accused of exploiting the crisis, reportedly raised room prices dramatically. Rooms that once cost a few thousand rupees were allegedly being offered for tens of thousands. A simple cup of tea that normally cost Rs40 was being sold for hundreds. Many families, unable to afford shelter, made the devastating decision to stay inside their cars overnight. That decision would cost lives. As snow blocked exhaust pipes, carbon monoxide quietly seeped into sealed vehicles. Hypothermia set in as fuel ran low. Children cried themselves to sleep in freezing back seats. Phones lost signal. Gas cylinders ran out. Food supplies dwindled. By morning, rescue teams were facing a catastrophe. 23 people would ultimately die. When footage began circulating on social media, the brutality of the situation became undeniable. Cars were buried so deeply that only side mirrors were visible above the snow. Rescue workers struggled through waist-high drifts. Soldiers moved vehicle to vehicle, knocking on frozen windows, searching for signs of life. On Friday night, authorities finally banned further traffic into Murree. By Saturday, military forces were deployed. Infantry platoons from the Pakistan Army, Frontier Corps, and Rangers joined the operation. Over 700 vehicles were pulled from the snow. Stranded tourists were taken to military-run relief camps, where they received warm food, medication, and blankets. But for 23 families, the help had come too late. Electricity failed in many areas. Water pipes froze. Residents themselves faced shortages of drinking water. Mobile service was patchy. Even as engineers worked to clear the Murree Expressway and reopen roads, the storm's impact lingered. Roads remained closed. The town that had welcomed tourists with open arms was now silent under a heavy, suffocating white blanket. The tragedy sparked outrage across Pakistan. The Prime Minister ordered an inquiry, and that's what makes the Murree snowstorm so haunting. It wasn't a remote mountain expedition gone wrong. It wasn't a handful of adventurers taking extreme risks. It was ordinary families, parents, children, friends, people who simply wanted to see snowfall. They drove into what they thought would be a winter wonderland. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a blizzard, in stationary cars that slowly turned into ice-cold chambers. Some died from the cold, some from invisible fumes, all within sight of other stranded vehicles, in a town filled with thousands of others just meters away. In Murree, it happened in a single night, and the silence left behind was colder than the storm itself.
Driving major multi-vehicle pileups across several states tonight as a winter storm sweeps across the Great Lakes and right into the Northeast. Dangerous travel conditions on the highways.
It starts with a single brake light glowing red in the snow, then another. Then it suddenly impacted. In the middle of a blinding winter storm in Michigan, more than 100 vehicles smashed into each other along Interstate 196, just southwest of Grand Rapids. What began as an ordinary drive through falling snow quickly spiraled into one of those terrifying chain reaction disasters that unfold in seconds and are caught in chilling detail on dashboard cameras and traffic cams. The snow wasn't just falling. It was swirling sideways, blown by fierce winds that erased the horizon. Drivers could barely see the cars in front of them, let alone anticipate what was happening beyond that thin curtain of white. Visibility dropped close to zero. The highway turned into a frozen guessing game. Pedro Mata Jr., one of the motorists caught in the chaos, later described how he could barely see anything as snow blew across the road. He managed to stop his pickup truck safely, but what haunted him wasn't what he saw. It was what he heard. The bangs, the booms, metal crunching against metal behind him. I saw what was in front of me. I couldn't see what was behind me, he said. That's the nightmare of a snowstorm pileup. You can try to control what's ahead of you, but what's coming from behind, you have no idea. Within minutes, Interstate 196 became a graveyard of twisted steel and shattered glass. More than 30 semi-trailer trucks jackknifed or slammed into smaller vehicles. Cars spun out, sliding helplessly across ice-slick lanes. Some drivers tried to swerve into the median to escape being crushed. Others had nowhere to go. The footage is visceral. Tractor trailers looming out of the white haze. Sedans crumpling like paper. Snow whipping so thickly across the camera lens that vehicles seem to materialize out of nowhere before impact. It's the kind of chaos where you don't even have time to react, only brace. Michigan State Police were forced to shut down both directions of the interstate as emergency crews struggled to reach victims in treacherous conditions. Rescuers navigated a frozen obstacle course of wrecked vehicles, checking each one for injuries. Miraculously, while there were numerous injuries, none were believed to be fatal. But survival doesn't erase the terror. This wasn't an isolated event. The pileup was just one violent episode in a massive winter system sweeping across the United States. The National Weather Service issued warnings spanning from northern Minnesota down through Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Temperatures were expected to plummet to minus 22 degrees Celsius with wind chill, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. And that's what makes these snowstorm pileups so brutal. It's not recklessness. It's not high-speed racing. It's ordinary people driving cautiously, families heading home, truckers on delivery routes, workers commuting, suddenly trapped in a whiteout where nature strips away every margin for error. You don't see the danger building. You don't hear it approaching over the howl of wind until it's too late. 1 second you're moving. The next, your world jolts violently as another vehicle slams into you. Then another and another. A chain reaction powered by ice, momentum, and zero visibility.
At least 9 members of a family were killed in Chitral after a snow avalanche buried their house as heavy snowfall, avalanches, and landslides disrupted life across northern Pakistan.
For days, the snow did not stop. It fell quietly at first over the mountains of Neelum Valley in Azad, Kashmir. Thick, steady, almost beautiful. Villages nestled between steep slopes disappeared under layers of white. Roads narrowed, power flickered, communication lines weakened. But for many residents, heavy snowfall in January is not unusual. Winter here is always harsh. This time was different. By January 16, 2020, the snow had grown dangerously deep. The mountains above the villages were heavy, overloaded, unstable. And then, without warning, they broke. A thunderous roar ripped through the valley as massive slabs of snow and ice tore down the mountainsides. Entire homes were swallowed in seconds. Walls collapsed. Roofs caved in. Families inside had no time to run. At least 74 people were killed. Dozens more were injured. And as hours passed, the death toll threatened to climb higher, with fears that many were still trapped beneath the frozen debris. Entire clusters of homes vanished. More than 80 houses and shops were completely destroyed. Dozens more were left partially damaged. Vehicles were crushed. A mosque was damaged. What had been a functioning community the day before became a landscape of flattened structures buried under meters of snow. The most haunting part? Many of the victims were inside their homes when the avalanches struck. In the immediate aftermath, there were no dramatic rescue machines carving clean paths through the snow. There were villagers, desperate, breath visible in the freezing air, digging with shovels with their hands, with anything they could find. Neighbors searching for neighbors. Parents screaming names into a silent white wasteland. Footage and photographs from those days show scenes that are almost surreal. Rescue workers waist deep in snow. Helicopters hovering low over isolated rooftops barely visible above the drifts. Soldiers forming lines to dig through compacted ice, racing against time and temperature. A state of emergency was declared. Helicopters flew search and rescue missions for 3 days, airlifting the injured to Muzaffarabad for treatment. Supplies were dropped into areas cut off by blocked roads, but even reaching some villages was nearly impossible. The snow had sealed them in. What makes this tragedy especially chilling is that it came during one of the harshest winters in nearly 2 decades. Authorities noted that while snowfall is normal for the region, the intensity of the cold this year was far worse, some attributing it to shifting climate patterns. Roads across Pakistan-administered Kashmir were blocked. Electricity was disrupted. Communication networks went down. Life, as residents knew it, froze. And the avalanches didn't just destroy buildings. They shattered the sense of security that comes from being inside your own home. A few days before Christmas 2022, buffalo began to disappear. Between December 21 and 26, a massive winter system exploded across North America. Meteorologists called it a once-in-a-generation storm. Rapid pressure drops created a bomb cyclone. Arctic air surged south. Winds screamed past 60 miles per hour. When that bitter air collided with the relatively warm waters of Lake Erie, it unleashed relentless lake-effect snow over Buffalo. From the morning of December 23rd through early December 25th, the city endured 37.5 consecutive hours of blizzard conditions, the longest in its history. Visibility vanished. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to white nothingness. Snow piled up faster than crews could clear it. In some areas, more than 4 feet fell, with drifts towering over vehicles. Wind gusts reached nearly 80 miles per hour. It felt less like a snowstorm and more like a hurricane made of ice. Emergency calls flooded in. Police body cam footage later showed officers pushing through knee-deep snow, leaning into violent winds, flashlights cutting through near-zero visibility. Inside stranded vehicles, families waited in freezing silence, some trapped for days. Exhaust pipes clogged with snow, fuel running low, temperatures plunging. Some victims were found frozen in their cars. Others became disoriented in whiteout conditions and collapsed outdoors, only steps from safety. Many died inside homes without heat as power failures spread. At the height of the storm, emergency services were overwhelmed. For a time, help simply could not reach everyone. More than 40 people died in the Buffalo region alone. Across the United States and Canada, the storm claimed over 100 lives. The deaths weren't only from exposure. There were vehicle pileups, cardiac arrests while shoveling snow, house fires from unsafe heating, and carbon monoxide poisoning from indoor generators. Buffalo Niagara International Airport shut down for 5 days. A driving ban lasted nearly a week. Highways became impassable. Entire neighborhoods were buried. Residents compared it to the blizzard of 1977, but this one proved even deadlier. What made the 2022 Buffalo blizzard so devastating wasn't just the snowfall or wind speeds. It was how it trapped people in ordinary places, cars, sidewalks, living rooms, and turned them into survival zones. People weren't climbing mountains or crossing glaciers. They were driving home for Christmas, walking to a store, shoveling a driveway, and suddenly the world disappeared. That Christmas week, Buffalo didn't just endure a storm. It endured isolation, exhaustion, and heartbreaking loss. Because sometimes the deadliest storms don't arrive with thunder. They arrive as snow, and they bury everything.